God came to us to seek and to save that which was lost. He raised a man from among us. He, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, laid the foundation. What I'm doing is something that comes from him through me, and the thing that he uses in me to do the work is my faith in him and the word that he taught. To produce men and women who wanted to clean up their life and build an independent nation for the glory of God.
Greetings. This is your brother Willie Muhammad, and thank you for joining us for another episode of I Have a Testimony on National Network View. Today, our special guest is Brother Rodney Muhammad. He's a student minister of the historic mosque in the Nation of Islam, Mosque No. 12. He's a historian, and he's also a great helper to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Thank you for joining us today, Brother Rodney.
Man, thank you for having me, Brother Willie, and thank you for the kind words.
Yes, sir. And we for our audience, they probably like, yo, where's the video? We were having some technical issues with the camera, but nonetheless, we've met and overcome the obstacles. We won't allow that to stop us, because it won't stop us with delivering the actual content. So when we're here, I'd like to get straight to the interview. My first question I would like to ask you, Brother Rodney, is how does it feel to be like the student minister, serving in the student minister position over this historic mosque number 12, often called top of the clock?
Well, in a word, it's an honor. I'm always feeling honored, and after honored, humbled. It has such a great and rich history in the city of Philadelphia. I was blessed when I came to the city to come to know, after meeting with and sitting with Minister Jeremiah Shabazz, who was one of the most notable ministers here in the city of Philadelphia for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And of course, he shared so much of the history with me. And since that time, there's been a book out about it. But the city of Philadelphia just has a rich history. When the minister sent me here, he did say, you'll be going to the most Islamically influenced city in the United States of America. So I, honored and humbled always. I have felt to be in the ministry here in a city that has the kind of history that it had before 1975, and even in the rebuilding.
Wow, and that's interesting that you say those are the words that the minister shared with you, because I have been told, Brother Dimitri has told me about how strong of influence that Islam has in the city of Philadelphia and the overall Islamic presence. But what's one of the interesting things is that it's one of the characteristics is a majority Black Muslim community. So how have you been able to manage to continue to hold up the banner and the flag of Islam as taught by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad in Philadelphia under those circumstances?
Well, I would say, number one, it took outreach, but it took patience. When I first moved here, I have to say that there was a lot more hostility with other groups as it related to the Nation of Islam. But over the years, we have warmed toward each other. Probably one of the landmark events that really began to bring us together in terms of projects and doing things annually was when some of the Muslims under Rodney Muhammad's leadership were putting money together to purchase $1 million church to have a mosque and school, and they were raising funds, and they asked the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan to come and be a keynote speaker at one of their dinners, in which case they sold out, and we have been able to really work with the other communities, and they're doing some things here in the city with CDCs and other organizational efforts. They have uh, they have a small museum where they are trying to put up things to reflect on the history of the Muslim community in the city of Philadelphia and that. So when it comes to the end of Ramadan, you'll find us doing Eids together. You'll find when they're doing certain events, there'll be people from our community going over, and we find them, for the most part, supporting some of our efforts in the city.
That's good. And you talked about how when you were sent there, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan gave you guidance when he mentioned about you going to a city that's heavily Islamically influenced. So how did you first become appointed to be the student minister of Mosque number 12?
Well, that's interesting. After serving as the national secretary for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the nation, I began going around the country again, troubleshooting problem areas. And so after going to certain cities, in which case Philadelphia was one of them, he talked to me about going back to Philadelphia to minister. And of course, it was going to be like a 900-mile difference, so I would have to move completely with the family and everything. But I felt anchored wherever the minister felt he needed me. And so he appointed me in 1991 to be the minister there, Mosque number 12 in Philadelphia. And since that time, we built a region. He sent us to a mosque, but we were able to build a region by building satellites all in the territory surrounding Philadelphia.
Wow, that's amazing. And preparing for this interview, of course, I've talked to different people and was asking them for some ideas on what type of questions, subject matter we can talk about. And one of the things that people brought up where they were talking about how you were actually in Chicago during the time when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan instructed the FOI to secure Brother Jesse Jackson when he first, right around the time he first announced he wanted to run for, I think, the Democratic nomination, ultimately president, and his life was threatened. So can you tell us about that experience?
Yes. I think when Reverend Jackson first came to the minister at that time gathered top laborers in the city or around the nation to come in to talk to them about helping Reverend Jackson in the campaign. He didn't just go into the campaign and begin instructing members of the nation, but the minister invited people in to hear their views and that. But ultimately, the team of people that he brought together, they voted and decided that it would be good for the nation to help Reverend Jackson in his bid for the presidency of the United States. Now, this put the minister in direct contact with the threats that were on Reverend Jackson's life and the harm they wanted to do to him and his family. And so he asked the FOI if the FOI would give to Reverend Jackson and his family the kind of security and loyalty that they give to him, Minister Louis Farrakhan, and his family. And so but the brothers agreed unanimously there in Chicago. And so a team was set up and they began to surround Reverend Jackson, his family, with protection. And there were serious death threats on the life of Reverend Jackson. Several white men, it was just under 100 that had been actually arrested and jailed for wanting to hurt Reverend Jackson because he had decided to run for president. And he was a formidable candidate in the early primary. There were about 7 people running, but Reverend Jackson was very sharp. He ended up, I believe, in 3rd place in that race. But once they saw the effectiveness of the FOI in securing Reverend Jackson and his family, it was interesting that he hadn't won for president. He wasn't president-elect or anything, but they were offering Secret Service protection for him because we believe they wanted to begin the separation of Reverend Jackson, Operation Push membership, and others in the civil rights community from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the nation at that time.
Wow.
But ultimately, he did take them up on their offer to use Secret Service security. But yes, we were there. I wasn't the direct security all the time, but there were a couple of the details that I was on that I can remember. There were pretty large gatherings in the city of Chicago where we were out making sure that Reverend Jackson had easy access to getting in and out of the meetings that he had to attend. They were pretty large meetings and gatherings. So it was a very exciting time in Black America at that time in the country.
Wow. Now you mentioned how, if I heard you correctly, how when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was asked by Reverend Jackson to support his campaign bid, how he sat with the leadership in the Nation of Islam to ask their input. And as you know, prior to that time, we weren't really as a nation delving into the political field. Like what can you share in regards to how the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan navigated that whole discussion, when he brought that back to those of you all who were there? Because that was a very delicate thing, because people could say, "Oh, you're deviating from what the messenger taught."
Yes. Well, the minister, I think, when the minister gets ready to do a great undertaking, from the years that I've been there, I've always seen him be open to counsel and to talk with others, particularly leadership in the nation, about the nation doing a greater undertaking. I think that the minister felt, when you feel that something is right and we can take the step, generally you're going to find something scripturally, because prophecy is history written ahead of time. And we begin to see how Jesus enters the picture on a public platform, starting with John the Baptist. Now, John the Baptist, the way I recall it, he had a very unusual ministry, because unlike the priests that were among the people at the time, the way it's recorded in the Synoptic Gospels, John the Baptist, he conducted his meetings out by the River Jordan. From what we understand, there were Jews there, there were Romans, there were Samaritans, there were a lot of other people who didn't necessarily fit the religious orders and framework of that day. You could say John the Baptist had a rainbow coalition. And as we've studied Reverend Jackson and how he started Operation Push, he wouldn't hold his meetings on a Sunday. He would hold his meetings on Saturday morning. Saturday morning, it gave preachers and church members an opportunity to come and attend Operation Push meetings. And in addition to that, it would provide a platform for sometime preachers to even come and be there and announce their support for Reverend Jackson. So these were very large gatherings on Saturday mornings. And so when the Honorable Louis Farrakhan spoke there, it began to put the minister's name in a greater and greater light. He was already known, but we're rebuilding the nation now. And so we're in these early years and stages of the rebuilding. So when you go scripturally, you'll see that as John the Baptist began to decrease, Jesus began to increase. You'll see that the Jewish element of that day, they were attacking John the Baptist before they were attacking Jesus. They didn't know enough about Jesus. And when you study the early articles in the newspaper, the headlines would read things like, "Who is Louis Farrakhan?" There would be headlines that would say, "Who's to blame for Louis Farrakhan?" and that. And so the minister once said that, like John the Baptist, we know what happened to him. And that was a prophecy we certainly wanted to be, because we didn't want Reverend Jackson to end up with such a fate. But he talked about never having voted in his life. And so that was a big day in Chicago when Reverend Jackson had the minister come down to City Hall and register to vote. And I can tell you, it was so many people out there. It was a big news story. But he talked about how Reverend Jackson baptized him in the muddy waters of this world's politics. So we saw these events in a scriptural light, also in a prophetic light, if you will. But nevertheless, the minister described coming into that as a man going in a door. And once he got in the room and saw what was coming after him, he said he turned around to go back out of the door, but the door was gone and there was a wall. And now his back was against the wall because he was under severe attack by the Jews. And, as you fight with those that fight with you, the minister then began to fight back. And so, the rest is history. But you read that scripturally, how there's a Jesus that's in the wilderness for 40 days and nights. But once this man comes out of the wilderness, this is the man that ends up in a very hot controversy with the Jewish community, or at least the Jewish leadership. And so you can see a big Jesus and a little Jesus coming out from the big one, from the wilderness after 40 years of the nation's work, phase one, and now this particular phase of the nation's work. Yes, sir.
Sir, thank you. And I was also told that you have worked with some of our NOI, well, I consider some of our NOI great laborers, both past and present. I would like to ask you some questions about them. The first one I'll start off with, tell us about the time where I was told that our late brother, Dr. College, served as your FOI captain or something.
Yes,
and you
sir.
all, the work that you all did in the Cabrini Green Housing Project?
Yes, sir. Brother Khalid was brought by the minister, I believe, by 1984, maybe a little bit before that, because he was our supreme captain by Savior's Day 1984. But he brought Brother Khalid to Chicago, and he brought him there to be the supreme captain at that time. And it wasn't just Cabrini Green Project, but Cabrini Green is probably the most notorious in Chicago. The comedy show Good Times is featured in Cabrini Green. 14,000 families battled in poverty, with gangs shooting from the roof, and maybe a stone's throw away, you have people living in $500,000 condos. So one night we actually were in Cabrini Green. We were there with her name will come back to me. She was a big name among the tenants there. There were gangs and groups there that didn't take a liking to our coming into Cabrini Green one night. But I remember they wanted to embarrass Brother College when he was speaking. They were going to make everybody get up and walk out the room, and College made them lock the door. Locked the door and wouldn't let nobody out of the meeting. So it got pretty tense that night. But we ended up in Robert Taylor Homes project. We ended up on the west side, sometimes we would be out until 2 in the morning, reaching our people who were still out on the street, in the pool rooms, the lounges, and different things. So, yeah, but Cabrini Green was one of the stops.
Wow. And also you had, we know we recently was informed of the passing of our brother, returning to Allah, brother Abdul Allah Muhammad.
Yeah.
And he's a very, we know he's a very profound teacher and scholar. Are there any memorable moments you can share with us about brother Abdullah?
Man, yeah. Oh man, wow, you really hit something there. I tell you, there are a lot of them, because he was so, he was, you know, he was so sharp. I used to call him the man of the one-liner. He could take, like the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he would try to take larger, complex things, and he could reduce it to a sentence or a phrase. And he would deliver it in a way where you say to yourself, "Why didn't I think of that?" But Brother Abdullah Muhammad, I mean, when we would sit and he would teach on some Sundays, man, the way he would unlock the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the way his mind worked, um, I just think that there are just so many. One of the things that I remember most, and I was asked this because Final Call is doing an article on him, and they spoke with me. But I said, I think he took this experience and put it in one of his 1155 articles. But when he was made the minister of Mosque 27 in Los Angeles, he said that he reached out to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, as many of the ministers would customarily do, to talk to the messenger about how he could become a good minister, in words, how he could become a good minister or provide good leadership in the city of Los Angeles, there on the West Coast. So he said the Honorable Elijah Muhammad told him, "Well, come on into Chicago, and this way you can spend the day with me. We can go over some things." So he was so excited that he'd get to spend a day with the messenger, right? So he said he went and purchased a brand new notepad, because he's really gonna get some notes now and things. And so he said he gets on the plane and gets to Chicago. The brothers bring him to the home of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he said over coffee, he opened up this notepad, getting ready to start taking notes. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad gave him 7 words, and the meeting was over. You want to be a good leader? He said, be what you want them to be. Be what you want them to be. Comes out to 7 words. And so the meeting was over. And Brother Abdullah Muhammad, may Allah always be pleased with him, he had a way of reducing things to smaller context, something that sounded so simple, you feel like I should have thought of that. And I remember once he shared so many things with us about what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught about mosque administration and things of the sort. And so he would be so definitive in the way that he talked, and you just learned so much from him of what he learned from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So I just remember him as a real hardliner and stickler for the messenger's teaching. He wanted to eat the way the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught. He loved coffee. Anybody knows Minister Abdullah Muhammad? He carried a jar of coffee with him because the coffee we would get was never strong enough. He wants some strong coffee, so he would put extra coffee in a cup, actually, and stir it in so that the coffee could be a lot stronger than it customarily was. So, but things that I went to with him, assignments that we might have done together, I could see in him anything that looked like it was moving away from anything that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught, immediately. And he had a sharp eye. He could see it or hear it. Minister Abdullah would come right down on it and try to bring everything back in line with what he remembered the messenger's teaching to be.
Wow. And may Allah be pleased with him. And the last question in regards to that series of questions, you were also present in Chicago with our dear sister, Dr. Ava Muhammad.
Oh.
Can you share with us from your perspective, your view, her value to the Nation of Islam?
Man, it's immeasurable, her value. I tell you, when she came in 1983, I believe was the year when she came to Chicago. I didn't know her history, and from what we understood, she was coming to Chicago to be an administrative, like, assistant to the minister. And so we figured we wouldn't see as much of her because we had acquired the palace, and she would probably be working more with the minister there. And back then, the minister's office was on the third floor of, I believe we were at the third floor of the Final Call building. And but on Friday nights, this woman would come out to teach, and for some reason on Wednesdays and Fridays, not very many people came out. So if you had 10 people out on a Friday night, you were doing something in Chicago. And she would just be teaching her heart out. And I would listen to these talks and things. And so eventually, she got involved with the ministry. She was opening up at the Final Call building and that, but a lot of what we started hearing from Sister Ava happened after the minister made the address in Phoenix, Arizona, self-improvement, the basis for community development. Now, she was teaching before that, but after this study guide, the minister had thought about a committee, as we understand it, that could help him produce a study guide. But the Spirit led him one day to grab her by the arm and sit her down and said, "Take this down." And she began to take things down and take it home. And, Sister Ava was using a typewriter then. So if one word was wrong, she had to retype the page. It's not like these computers today. But she would prepare for us things that the minister had shared, and they began to start these study groups. I was working with a group of brothers because we were in the ministry class under Minister Abdul Akbar Muhammad, who was the assistant minister at that time. And they were pulling us in because the minister was starting to bring a group together to start entertaining these self-improvement study guides. And back then, we weren't used to teaching, I believe. And I say we, although I was just a young teacher, I had never been in the nation before. But we weren't used to teaching about ourselves and maybe some of our own failings, our own challenges, and things where we may be stumbling over our own foot. And I'm using those terms to say, self-improvement, it took us a long time to tell people, stop trying to improve somebody else, improve yourself. This is a self-improvement study course. You should be talking about yourself and not someone else. But when you're out teaching, the white man is the devil, the enemy, what other folks are doing to Black folks and everything, we weren't used to really talking about how I could become a better person, what we need to do to improve ourselves and our homes and our communities and things like that. But by Sister Ava working so close with the minister, putting this material together for us, I used the word champion. She was a champion at teaching the public and the world through, we had a live broadcast at that time. The Final Call building, we didn't have the webcasts and things like that. Now we just had a live radio broadcast. It started at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we would be on WBEE for an hour. And man, this sister would get on and start teaching. But from those study guides, there was so much in it. And the minister wanted that talked about more because this is the way God was using him. And so I just remember Sister Ava being a lead voice on that, notwithstanding that as an attorney, she was handling, cases that were coming against the nation and against the minister. And one of the reasons they haven't been able to drag Minister Louis Farrakhan into court these 40-something years that he has been up in the rebuilding of the Nation of Islam has been the legal skills applied by student minister Ava Muhammad, and then later Brother Arif Muhammad came on to team up with her in the efforts. And I never forget in New York Superior Court one day when she was dealing with a lot of legal briefs and that, and he said, "Sister, the Holy Quran is the basis for the law that these folks in this country are operating with. And so you just take the Quran." And she went just like he said. And she went in that New York Superior Court, and we were up there that day with her. And I mean, she dealt with that case, following the minister's guidance on that. I could go on, but I just say that, I'm not surprised she's the national spokesperson, because she has always, every time she opened her mouth, she has always provided us with an insight into the minister, not just what he said, but why he's saying it, what impact it's having. And so I thank Allah for her, and I thank Allah that she's still there helping the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in that way. But there's a lot more I could say, about her. But I'm just saying, she came as administrative assistant. Now I will say this, but it's not to pump me up. But Sister Ava never stopped to take value in her own tapes. She just taught, and she kind of kept going. All her tapes were in the basement of the Final Call building. I used to talk to her about her tapes. I said, "Sister, you should be selling those tapes." So one day I went over to the Final Call building as the national secretary, had them open up the thing. I took all the boxes out and I brought them to her. And she said that's when it really became a reality to her, when she looked at all her tapes, and they began to make recordings. And man, her tapes were selling like hotcakes all over the country. Just a fascinating woman.
Wow, that's some great history to actually share that about her, and even what you said about the genesis, about her tapes begin to start being promoted. And we are transitioning to the next question. I want you to, as we talk about this next question, I want you to think about your earlier days in Islam. When you reflect on your life, do you see how any of your earlier life experiences prepared you to accept the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad? If so, what specific one? Like anything that you experienced?
I think, growing up in Chicago, of course, we just partied. We partied hard, and my family owned about 8 nightclubs in Chicago on my father's side. So my folks were partying people. Standard for us was coming in at least at 2 a.m, because you got to close up the club, lock up and everything, and clean up and get ready for the next day's generating money. Nevertheless, in Chicago, you get extra hours on Saturday. So when we would leave my father's place and it would close up at 3 a.m, sometimes we would go over to some of the other parties where they stayed open almost 5 a.m. And you imagine a going from a life of coming in at 5 in the morning to trying to get up at 5 to pray. A real contrast there. But sometimes the radio would be on in the car when you're driving home. And so the minister would be on early in the morning on the radio. They'd be playing a tape of him. I don't know who set that up or how that was going, but people would say, wait, don't turn from there. That's that man on again. That's what they were calling him in the street, that man. He's teaching, and they'd be playing his tapes, and we say, wow, this is really something, this man talking here. But I didn't know him. I think I saw him once on a show called Common Ground in Chicago. This back in the 70s, late 70s, and that. But by growing up, in Chicago, it's a gang city, lots of big gangs, organized big gang leaders, and that kind of thing. The minister has talked about it before, also, and going to school. I always had a problem with the way things were. I could have a good time just like everyone else, but it would always come up in my mind about what was going on with Black people, the politics and everything. So I was trying organizations that were a fit. I did some work with Trans Africa. I did my mother's sister. After my mother would take me to Operation Breadbasket sometime, trying to keep me on the straight path. We would go over there where Reverend Jackson was meeting because SCLC put him up there over their projects that they didn't feel would work in the South. So they put Operation Breadbasket in Chicago and New York City. That's where Al Sharpton started out over there at Breadbasket in New York. But I did join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. I was going to Hakeem Madaboudi's bookstore. I was just, every time I got paid, I took money out and I bought 1 or 2 books, and I was just building up a home library and just reading a lot. I had tapes of Malcolm X and everything. So all these things were impacting me. One night, Dr. Charles Knox, I think Lou Palmer, Hakeem Madabouti, and others in Chicago were putting on a big meeting. And a guy I grew up with called me. I was going to DePaul University then. He said, because I dropped out of school and then I went back to college. And I'm an accounting major and minoring in economics. But anyway, long thing short, we get to this meeting. Minister Louis Farrakhan is the keynote speaker. And man, the survival of the Black nation in 1979, that just had me going. And so every time I heard he was speaking in Chicago, I went. He was at Dunbar High School dealing with religion and revolution with Stokely Carmichael. So I went to that meeting. He was at Medina Temple in Chicago. I went to that meeting, and then I went to Savior's Day 1981. That was the first Savior's. I didn't know, but that was the first Savior's Day in the rebuilding. I just went. And from that time on, I would start trying to find out where he was meeting and then I joined the nation the following year.
Wow, that's very, very, very good, very interesting history. And I'm glad when you talked about the minister, and I'll transition to the next question related to him. The title of this show is I Have a Testimony, where we work to try to get guests to talk about and testify about the minister. So from your perspective, why is it important for those whose lives have been touched by him to testify of such?
Well, I think because it helps people to identify him. When you study Jesus in the Synoptic Gospels, they learn about him, being from the church, and on my mother's side, living with my grandmother, she was heavily religious. I was actually baptized in a creek in Tennessee down there. They didn't have pools or that kind of thing, but you go to the Synoptic Gospels, these are personal experiences of people. the man born blind, the prostitute that they wanted to stone to death. And he said, let him who is without sin cast the first stone in that. And so I think when people have personal experiences about someone and people hear uh, something about those experiences, they get a recording of it, it helps establish for them, who someone really is, what kind of person they really are. And so I think that testifying how a man of that kind of consequence impacts your life, um, I think it says a lot about who that man is. Some people will talk about how wayward their life was, how reckless it was in that. They heard a man and somehow they just came out of it. I felt like I was just born to be with him because everywhere else I was, they didn't have nothing on the street that could get me high enough to where I could be just comfortable being a Negro. After I heard Minister Louis Farrakhan, I had to begin to walk away from a lot of things, and I walked away from a lot of people to just go. Uh, in those days, sometimes people thought you were dead because I can remember in early 1980s when people joined the nation, you just left everything. You weren't even at the mosque, and then once the mosque was over, back over hanging with so and so, and that we didn't have our feet in the world and in the mosque at the same time. We left the mosque, and Sister Ava and I laugh about that now. We had old classmates that thought we were dead because nobody saw us. we just got swallowed up in the nation. Um, and so it's been a great life. I think we've all had ups and downs and struggles and places where we may have stumbled, but my worst day since I've come with the Honorable Louis Farrakhan will beat any day that I had before I met him.
Wow, praise be to Allah. And these next series of questions are intended to help not just inspire us to be like the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, but to also learn how we can apply some of these qualities into our own life, which he will really want. And there's three of them that I want you to talk about. What can we learn from him in the area of forgiveness?
Yeah, that's for people who are in faith. Yeah, forgiveness is called the last frontier. Most people in faith try to find every reason they can not to be a forgiving person, but I can say that being with the minister, he didn't sit down and didactically through words teach me how to be a forgiving person. I just learned how to be that by being around him. Obviously, any of us that has anyone that injures us, we almost feel like black folks, we have a duty to be against that person. But I have seen the Honorable Louis Farrakhan almost like he was befriending someone that we knew was an enemy. And while we got rocks in our jaws about somebody having the nerve to come back around him, and the minister's not blind, but see, it's that incredible capacity to love. And if you have any fraction of that kind of love, you're starting to learn how to be forgiving. And some people say forgive and forget. I don't think you forgive and if you could forget, you wouldn't need to forgive. I think learning how to forgive is because you can't forget, but you treat the person or persons, you treat them like you've forgotten about the whole thing. And you find out if you can start, it gets easier and easier each day not to hold a grudge. And I think those of us that are in the Nation of Islam, if we've rubbed each other the wrong way, if we've injured each other in ways, just look at how we still love each other after all these years. And some of us struggle with each other and everything as we're trying to come into this. You know, we're a product of the workings of our enemy. And when you have an enemy that has made you suffer, um, you don't, you're conditioned to give your leadership nothing but suffering. So when people say, "Oh, I want to lead black people," well, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, "Well, come on, you're in a world that's going to test you on just how sincere you are about that. Because if anything and anyone will try you, it's the Negro, and the Negro is a creation of the United States of America."
Well, beautifully said. And also picking up on that same theme in the question, how could we learn from observing him how to grow in our love for our people?
Well, what I can see, to me, he loves God first and the messenger and the people that God has targeted for the message. Um, the love of God operating in the human heart gives you the kind of love you need not to fall out of love with black people. Um, if you really love black people, you're going to love the one that has the best solution, answer, or remedy for black people. And there is no one that has greater love for and a better solution for an answer to the suffering of black people than God himself. Do we believe that a man met with God? Because once we say we believe a man met with God, then you're not going to try to pride yourself against that man lest you try to pride yourself against the unequal wisdom of the God that raised that man. I remember when we were working with Dianetics to try to work with things that may be hampering our mind from just being the full kind of committed person to life that we obviously desire to be by becoming members of the nation. And we were having dinner with some of the old soldiers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And the minister said to them, he said to Minister Rahman and some others, he said, we never needed anything like Dianetics because when we sat down with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we believed that we were sitting with a man that met with God. And that's what we went back to our cities with. And I mean, that level of belief just, it set you on fire. And so one night the minister was showing a flashlight, and you take a flashlight and lay it on a table and turn the light on it. He said, right here at the flashlight is the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He said, when he was among us, that kind of mind and spirit was strong in the mosque. The law was strong. And so the spirit in the mosque was high. And when you got a high spirit in every temple that you have, you're dealing with a group of people that don't feel like it's anything that they can fail at if it's for Allah and his messenger. And even in a city like Philadelphia, Imam came to me one day. He said, brother, he said, I didn't really learn the Quran till 1976, and I joined the nation in 1969 in Philadelphia. He said, the only religion I knew was if anybody was trying to hinder or hurt or injure the Honorable Elijah Muhammad of his work, he said, if we had to hitchhike to get there, to shut that whole thing down, that was our religion. So, I'm just talking about the level of zeal that people had. And, that, I mean, it's wonderful to be able to live like that because you at top performance. You don't need perfect skills. You just need a perfect faith, and you can get things done. And so I learned from the minister, you know, focus and zeal. And you can recover even if you feel burnt out. He said the sun ain't burnt out. It's been up there for trillions of years. And you need to get connected with what the sun is connected with, and your fire will never go out. In my early training as an FOI, I was always trained that a savage needs a fire up under him to get him to move. But an FOI always has a fire inside of him. And so, having that inner fire makes you self-motivated. You can always be inspired. Any of us can be inspired to do greater than what we're doing. But to have to be motivated from sitting and doing nothing, he said God didn't come for us to do nothing. We must get up and do something, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said.
Yes, sir. Very, very profound. And preparing for this interview as well, I came across, I never forget when a minister came to Philly, and I think the mayor at that time, Mayor Rendell,
Yeah,
talked about, how they had that incident that took place, I think at Gary's Ferry or something in that neighborhood.
Gray's Ferry.
Gray's Ferry. And when he shared publicly about what the mayor told him in comparison, your representation and position compared to all of the other pastors that were coming to him, where he said that, when all of them were coming there had their agenda wanting something, a handout. But he said when he asked you what you wanted, you just basically said that you just wanted justice for our people. Like, how did it make you feel when you heard the minister say that publicly about you?
Well, like I said, I never talked to him about it. To be honest, initially, some well-placed Black folks start calling Chicago, I guess, trying to get on me to stop me, because the mayor was really trying to stop that march. And I never forget that he said they got to the minister like I was doing something terrible in the city. And so the minister, he contacted me to find out, what the heck are you doing? And so I said, well, sir, we're marching down there because they wanted to hurt this Black woman, blah, blah, blah. I'm going through it. So anyway, the minister said, well, brother, what is going on in the city? He was really getting on me. And then I said, well, point number 11, sir, says that the Black woman must be protected like the women, in words of other nations and that. So it got quiet. I thought my head was coming off then. And then he said, and mob attack. He went to point, I think number 6, 5 or 6 in what the Muslims want. And it taught me that, man, when you're dealing with civic engagement, you want to stay with the Muslim program that's on the back page of our paper. And so when the minister got to Philadelphia, he said, brother, Allah was all in this. And so I never told him about, I had got a phone call about money and contracts and different things and stuff. So I didn't know till after I got back up to a private setting with the minister that the mayor had said all that to him. And Rendell and I, we tried to work together, because naturally the Jews came after Rendell about having the minister. But, Rendell told them, I never forget, on a show after the minister left, he said, all my life, he said, I've been told that the Palestinians were the enemy of the Jews. And after blood has been shed on both sides, Rendell said, now you all are sitting down talking with Yasser Arafat. He said, but Minister Farrakhan has not shed any blood of any Jew. And yet you're getting on me about talking with a man that shed no blood, and you all are sitting down having talks where blood has been shed on both sides. And I thought that was such a profound point that he made on that early news program there. But yeah, it was an incredible day. Um, and you know, there were people who were angry and they wanted to go over there and march. But you know, Grace Ferry was a white area, kind of blue collar white area then, that had done a lot of beatings of black people over the years, I found out. So we really had struck a chord. And of course, this was 2 years after the Million Man March. So you really had black men around the country geared up. They wanted to do something. So when they heard about the march in Grays Ferry, they started coming all the way from Decatur, Illinois, Connecticut. They were getting buses and everything. I mean, we really didn't have to hardly promote anything. This thing had a life of its own, um, um, there. And of course, to me, it was the first time that the Nation of Islam was called in to help deal with a race problem rather than calling the Nation of Islam the race problem itself.
Wow, that was interesting. And you mentioned earlier about how when you were sent to Philadelphia, how the work that you all did that ended up developing another region, which is the Delaware Valley region. So can you explain, like, how did that idea come about? Like, what made you say, well, we need to have this particular region?
Well, we didn't. It didn't start out as a region. A lot of these areas were satellites of Number 12, and you know, as I would go out into the areas there, because in our region, a lot of our cities are close by. These were satellites of Number 12, and our regional minister. We were part of the East Coast then, was Minister Don Muhammad out of Boston. And so we were building little satellites around us, and so was Minister Kadir. Minister Kadir was over Mosque 25 in Newark, New Jersey, and he had satellites also. And the minister had written letters to people in these areas in some of the early years that I got to Philadelphia about myself and Brother Kadir. To be real honest, I didn't think about it until um, Brother Rasul was going to Miami. And he called me one day and he said, well, he said, brother, I'm getting ready to start a new assignment. And he said, the minister told me to call you. He said to me, I could only go by what he said, but he said, called myself and called Brother Kadir. He said, because he sent us to a mosque and a city and we built territories. And so all of these, a lot of these were satellites uh, until the minister wanted a region. And when he set up with Ben Chavis over New York City at that time, he then said that day, uh, Brother Rodney's going to be over an area called the Delaware Valley. So then I took all the satellites and we cut them off from being satellites and made them their own cities, you know. Yeah.
And that's how that actually came about. Interesting. Now, also, you know, my personal opinion, I think you are one of the things you in 2015 that you made history, and I'll explain what I mean by that. When you, a member of the Nation of Islam, student of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, under the guidance of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, when you were appointed as the local chapter head of the NAACP, which is a civil rights organization, right? And most people kind of place us on the opposite ends of the spectrum. But to me, I thought that was very significant and historically significant. How did that come about? And do you see that appointment as being historically significant? If so, can you share your views with that?
Yes, sir. In 1996, J.Y. Monazire, he came to me because he was so inspired after the Million Man March. He came to me and asked would I support him in his run to be president of the Philadelphia chapter of the NAACP. And I said, of course. And so J.Y. Monazire was the real president. And for about 17 years, he did that. I joined the NAACP. We were always encouraged to join other organizations and things. And I joined the NAACP. And, I never looked, as the law is my witness, I never looked for any position, certainly not president or anything. But over the years, what happened, some infighting began to take place. And when I started going back to the meetings and was on the board, um, they got in some trouble with the funds or something with the national office. Long thing short, um, they they had to get rid of some people, and the NAACP bylaws say that when you get rid of some officers, you have to fill the vacancy. So the board voted that night to make me the second vice president and to make one of Kenny Gamble from Philadelphia International Records his right hand man Raheem Islam the third vice president, and the first vice president was Reverend Fitchett. So when the next board meeting came, the president was suspended by the national board. So the first vice president became the president. And because I was second vice president, I became first vice president. And it hit the newspaper. So everybody was just talking and everything. So I did write the minister to just say, you know, this thing is looking like it's moving us along, but I wasn't trying to become anything in it. I had been in it. But anyway, the next month when the board meeting got ready to take place, I got a text, can you get here and run the meeting? And I said, what happened to the Reverend? He usually runs it. He's the president now. They said he had a stroke. And so he never recovered from the stroke. So I was really running the organization till the next election came up. And when the election came up, I ran and won. We had to work hard because they were trying to do everything they could. That no Muslim, no Nation of Islam person should be over this and that. They wrote the national board and did all kinds of things. But once I was in, and the national board got to know me and everything, and I mean, we know how to follow rules and different things like that if it doesn't conflict with our religion. And there were others around the country I found out that were in the nation that were in the NAACP once I started getting to the national conventions and that. But we did quite a bit with the branch. They wanted me to run to save the branch, and we tried to restore, its finances and all of that kind of thing. And so, we did really good at the conventions, the national conventions, and our own fundraisers and the different projects that we worked on there. I was also appointed to be chair of the board for Philadelphia County Prisons. You know, a chaplain for the sheriff's office, and so just a lot of things we served on in the city to try to make an impact. But it was significant. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said in the early years, he said the NAACP would be a great organization under his leadership. It's very organized on the inside. And of course, the minister said that his mother uh, nourished him with the crisis writings of Du Bois, because that was their publication. And I think the crisis writings is what inspired the minister to want to go down to an HBCU to experience what his people were really up against in the South, um, having come up in a northern city in Boston. So in the minister's earlier years, in terms of literature, things that you're reading and feeding on, it was writings from the NAACP at that time. I did learn a lot, about different things within the NAACP, but by and large, it's been co-opted by corporate America. Some branches take a little stronger stand than others. And you have to realize in Philadelphia, it had a very, very large membership under Cecil B. Moore, who had worked with Malcolm X, because Philadelphia was actually Malcolm's first ministry. And so Cecil B. Moore probably had 25,000 members in the Philadelphia branch alone. And Cecil B. Moore was like a powerhouse, within himself. It was no secret he didn't get along well with Dr. King when Dr. King would come to Philadelphia, the same as Adam Clayton Powell up in New York. But nevertheless, the NAACP in Philadelphia, it had a different kind of history than some of the average branches.
Wow. And we know that there was controversy around your position was a couple of months ago, and you're no longer serving in that capacity. What guidance, if any, did the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan give you regarding that controversy?
Stand on the truth that I've given you. He said, I haven't lost a fight yet. The final call, I think they did a story without talking to me, and by going by what different people who jumped the gun had written in the newspapers, it caused some of the Jewish publications to print it too. But I'm still the president of the Philadelphia branch of the NAACP.
Wow. See that?
No, nobody kicked me out. One of the reasons I stayed was because the president, CEO, he would not let the Jewish organizations pressure him to get rid of me. And because he took a stand, I wasn't going to run out on him and leave him by himself. And so I won't run again for president. I don't intend to carry on with it, but I am still technically I'm still the president. So people come to it, and we've been doing some things with other organizations and outfits and that.
Wow.
I chose to take a lower profile during the election so that the organization could be successful at what they were trying to do in the presidential election. But they really, I wanted people to see how powerless they really are. Because sometimes people would criticize, say, the nation or this, that, and the other. But most of the issues that Black people are fighting in Philadelphia and around the country, they're already in the book called The National Agenda, that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan had Ben Shavers go out and work with other organizations, and one of them was the NAACP, to secure information and things that we needed to do in terms of civic engagement. And as late as 2015, Justice or Else, when they wanted to know the next day, Minister Farrakhan, what's the follow-up? He had Brother Rasul bring down the book, The National Agenda, and he gave him that book and said, this is the follow-up. And so that was my guide, along with the back page of our newspaper, as I was trying to work as a civil rights person there in the NAACP.
Wow. Thank you for letting us know that. And our listeners, in preparing for this interview, I talked to our regional minister, brother, student minister Abdul Halim Muhammad, and he talked about how you are a lover of history, especially the history as it relates to the mafia, right? And it made me think about how the internet, the libraries, and Hollywood are filled with movies and documentaries about the mafia, and they basically glorify these mafia figures.
Oh yeah.
But then they glorify them, but then they do that while condemning like the young brothers and sisters in hip hop who are basically mimicking these mafia organizations. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yes, sir. And Chicago was like a bloodbath. In some ways, they say that the fight between the Irish, the Germans, and Polish fighting from the north side of Chicago, fighting the Italians on the south side. They say that started the roaring, what they call the Roaring 20s. Whether or not that part is true or not, I don't know, but I know that blood really flowed in the streets of Chicago between the North Side Gang and Al Capone. And um, subsequent to all of that, by the 1960s, the gangs, the black gangs in Chicago began to really grow and structure themselves. And so when I was coming up on the south side of Chicago, I can remember uh, the the Blackstone Rangers being at like 15,000 in membership. I can remember the disciples being, at least 8 or 9,000 in membership. There were 12,000 vice lords on the west side of Chicago. So these gangs were very large. They were structured almost like whole governments on the street, and um, the violence that's attributed, to us, they don't want to attribute it to conditions. They'd love to just say we're a violent people and that kind of thing. But we have, as Dr. King said, we never invented gangs. This was downloaded from white America, as you said. And but there's a little difference in the way you'll see a white gang, you see a gang of guys following a leader. But having been in a gang in Chicago, when you get to a gang meeting, they held tribunals. There were people who came up and presented cases, and somebody might have argued in your defense, and somebody argued against you when they were dealing with someone. So, I'm not thinking at that time, I'm in ignorance, but when I reflect back on it, it's like we didn't have just a group of guys following one leader. There were actually levels of commands, and tribunals were set up. And it's almost like young people wanted their own government and they had to set it up out on the streets. They had their own code to deal with. And I think about the law of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad because his law is tempered with mercy. And I think it was a time the minister talked about some of the gang leaders talking to him, and two of them were young, but it was a 63-year-old man sitting behind them. And of course, the minister let them know you can't bring injury to anybody in the nation because the FOI is certainly going to retaliate. But this young man, he said something like, all these people around you, Minister Farrakhan, are not with you. Now, these people on the street, so they see everybody and what everybody's doing, and they see what folks are not doing. And the minister wanted everybody to listen to these men because he said, if you're not going to live by the law of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, so it made me go home and really reflect on that law. And I thought about it. You in the temple, you lie. Okay, 90 days. You steal 90 days. And then you can come back. Their laws, their violations, their penalties, but they're tempered with mercy. But when you're in the law of the jungle, as it says, our people strayed from civilization and now they live in a jungle life. A jungle life is colorful, man, but it's deadly. You steal from somebody out there, they're not giving you 90 days. That's going to be a permanent situation. See, you don't have things tempered with the mercy to bring you to a state of correction. Everything that's out there is you violate somebody out there, they're ready to take you out. And so we're blessed people to be living in the midst of folks that we have no taboo in our community now. If you and I took a trip and went to South America or interior Africa where people are still living in the forest and in the bush, and we stayed with them about 2 weeks, you and I would find they have a taboo system. Just because they live in the forest, just because people say they're primitive or savage, don't mean they don't have a code of conduct. And when somebody violates that code, you'll find them tortured, killed, or excommunicated or something. But nevertheless, there's a reward and penalty system set up in there. Our communities are breaking down with no code of conduct. And so you can just about do anything without consequences. And that's a dangerous way for us to live. And so, we're trying to reach and teach because at some point, I remember the minister saying he got the brothers together one night and they went out after folks that were doing harm and injury to their own people in the community. And a call came from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, just said it's not time for that yet. He didn't say it should never take place. He said, you wait till you have 70% or better of the people with you. So there has to get to a point where we have to set things in order. But the more we can reach people and draw on the good nature of God, the better it is for them and us and for the community as a whole.
Beautiful. And this is the last question. In your opinion, what characteristic of the minister that he possesses separates him from any other leader?
Well, yeah, I'd say any other leader and any other human being that I know at the present time is his incredible capacity to love. I think that sits head and shoulders above everything. The minister, that's where his real power comes from, because perfect love casts out fear. You got a sometime kind of love. Maybe you're not afraid on this, but they can put fear in you on something else. But the minister's level of courage and everything has everything to do with his great capacity to love.
Wow.
And believe me, we love more than we used to love just by being with him.
Mm.
And just because we don't seem to be jumping out in the street emotional every time something takes place doesn't mean that we, members of the Nation of Islam, don't love. We love you enough that with all the madness going on, we're trying to be an example of something else. The better we get at it, the better the example becomes, the more our people have a chance to look at something that could give them a way out of the dilemma they find themselves in, the misery index.
Wow. And I know I said that one more question comes to mind. This is historic. We have to ask, because we often talk about the historic Million Man March, but also the historic Women March, Million Women's March, took place in Philadelphia, I believe in 1997. So I don't know. Were you were there? You were able to witness it?
Sir. We were on the stage with Winnie Mandela and others. Brothers had security around the stage, and the women who were involved had his sister Filet and Sister Asia Coney, Jackie McDowell, and Paula Peoples, and those women. After putting that on, they all stayed. Some of them stayed in the housing development. They began to take over tenant management and that to make life better. Paula Peoples is the statewide chair for Al Sharpton for the National Action Network. But there was just tremendous outpouring of women in the city. All over. They brought a large amount to the economy of Philadelphia, and that. But many of those women, Filet is working to try to keep the spirit of the Million Women March alive annually, and some of the others are working in significant positions to work with our people, but they're all working with our people that are on the bottom, doing something in a way substantive of lifting them up from that condition.
Wow. So, because I know also Mother Khadijah was there, Winnie Mandela, and Sister Soldier. So when they spoke, because did Mother Khadijah speak, and like what was the atmosphere when they shared words?
I think she spoke. It was a good atmosphere. Sister Ava was the main woman from the Nation of Islam that spoke. that day. But no, Mother Tanetta, Mother Khadija, and Sister Ava Muhammad. And that primarily what brought us to the stage, because the captain at that time had FOI around to secure, the parameters and the stage area and everything for our folks.
And wow. And lastly, this is it. I know
Sure.
we're closing. Was there anything that you wanted to share, but you didn't get a chance to share because maybe I didn't ask the question? If so, here's your opportunity.
Well, I just it's beautiful. I certainly want to thank all of the laborers first of Philadelphia. Nobody is where they are on their own. Uh, and I thank Allah for the laborers that I have in the city of Philadelphia, and especially throughout our Delaware Valley region. Um, when people work together in unity, it saves you a lot of headaches. And so I'm blessed to have brothers serving in the ministry who are not trying to upstage each other and outdo each other and everything, but just good men who all want to support each other, and they all want to be good helpers to the minister. They attribute it to me, but I don't think it's me. I think, they have to bring something to the table to be those kind of men that they've shown themselves to be in the Delaware Valley. We want to bring young people on, and we hope that they will learn it right. I just try to remind young people, if you're born on third base and you didn't hit the ball, then you should know somebody went to bat for you. So don't ask for everybody to turn their jersey in, and you should lead just because you got a later date on your birth certificate. You want a baton pass, get on the track. I was 28 years old when I came to the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. I never even had a private thought that Minister Kareem, Brother Khalid, Minister Akbar, somebody should step to the side so I could have some spot or something like that. That is one of the most, what they're doing to the generations now. I just think is horrible.
Yes.
In a way, I was born on third base, so I'm grateful somebody hit the ball so I could get there.
Wow.
And you just never gonna get anywhere in life with ingratitude.
Wow.
So be thankful that people helped us to get to where we are right now. Even in the nation's development, I experienced the same thing in the NAACP. So I said, so you all want everybody to step to the side. Think if we'd have tried to tell Rosa Parks that, or Thurgood Marshall, and others in the NAACP and other organizations that had fought, Walter White, who began to try to dismantle segregation from the courtroom so they wouldn't have a legal leg to stand on. The minister says, if it be an Adam's way to good, we ought to be grateful. And I just hate to see Black America turning into an ungrateful generation.
That was that analogy that you gave, using that baseball analogy, is excellent, because when people start hearing the minister start talking about the Joshua generation, you started hearing that. And it wasn't until I heard Father Flager made the point that he was like, man, Joshua wasn't no 20-year-old person. This dude was like in his 60s or something.
Oh yeah. Oh,
so
yes,
it ain't.
It was.
When the minister say that, it is not that goes to show you, it's not about an age, it's about the spirit.
It's about the spirit, and we should be working to build a place for our younger people to take over. Generationally, to make every generation start at ground zero, that's not a healthy legacy. But at the same time, just remember, we're all on the same team. And so there was an old saying, young men for war, old men for counsel.
Yes, sir.
And I always remind young men when I'm speaking, if young men close their ears to the counsel of old men, even though they made for war, they might lose the war.
Lose their head.
So let's all learn from each other. I learned greatly from the Abdullah Muhammad, Minister Akbar Muhammad, Minister Kareem Muhammad, Brother Khalid, when he was with us. I kept my ear and my heart open to learn. And that's the way I want to leave the planet, because the way I learned from Minister Farrakhan, I'm going to leave this planet learning. Because whatever I know, it should have taught me how much I don't know.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes,
Well,
sir.
brother Minister Rod, we thank you for this
Thank you,
opportunity.
man. Thank you.
And
I had a good time.
Yeah, definitely. And there's so much we're going to have to, even despite the video challenges, it didn't take away from the interview. There's still so much that you share, and we definitely will get you back on so we can talk more, just the wealth of history that you know. So I appreciate it. The people are leaving great comments. They're enjoying it as well. And once we upload it, once it finished being uploaded on YouTube, I'll send you the links and you'll be able to actually watch it. Want to give a special shout out to the brother and sister that's behind the board, because as you mentioned, you can't do this alone. So Sister Kenya, thank you. And we thank Brother Mushi Muhammad for what they all are doing as well, because they're the ones that are bringing these graphics in and out. We appreciate it. Did I pronounce his name? Mushat. I got it right. Well, I put but thank you all as well. And I also thank the guests. So what we're going to do, just show our next two slides, we're going to show what we have coming up. And he'll be bringing the slide up for those people. On next Sunday, we're going to have he's from Memphis, Brother Ilya Rashad. So inshallah, he'll be on December the 27th, next Sunday at 1 p.m. And then our next slide, for those who want to help us out, we're in the process of trying to raise the funds to burn our mortgage for our mosque. So if you're interested, they can donate at Cash App, $Mosque 46. So we definitely appreciate that. And as I said again, brother Rodney, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Brother Willie. Thank you so much. Man, sorry about the technical difficulties.
No,
it's probably on my end.
But the beauty of it is we didn't allow that to stop us, and we didn't allow it to stop us, and we kept it moving, and that's the spirit that we have. So as we close, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to I Have a Testimony. Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below and follow us on social media. This is your brother Willie Muhammad with the National Network View. Peace.
All praises due to Allah. Thank you.
Yes, sir.